to the first episode of Objections. I'm Michael Morris with my good buddy, Stan Willis. Stan, how are you?
I'm awesome. I can't get any more awesome. If I get any more awesome, I'll actually be you.
Do you realize that the first show out the gate, you can't get any better than this?
Yeah, I know. It's downhill.
So it's all downhill. Every show from this, crash and burn. I like
It's
it.
going to be okay. Well, we'll start. Try it again. Ask me again.
Stan, how are you?
I suck, man. This is awful.
This is good. This is good. We can only get better.
Good. Okay.
We are like McDonald's. We start with one franchise and we're going to build them out.
We're going to build them out.
And we're going to rip off the people with the original concept. But that's why people are listening.
That is. I mean, concepts are made to be ripped off.
That's right. Well, let's talk about ripping off the American public, shall we?
Okay.
So I'll tell you where I came up with this topic. I was watching on YouTube. Do you ever get on the YouTubes?
YouTube is the source of all knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
it's never incorrect. It's never somebody's just random.
The only thing that surpasses YouTube for the source of all knowledge is TikTok.
Well, I do get most of my health-related information from TikTok. I'm not going to lie about that. But when I want to know how to do something or what's going on in the world, I go right to YouTube. I skip the mainstream media.
You can learn how to change a carburetor on YouTube.
You can, yeah. But here's the thing. Who wants to do that?
People who have bad carburetors.
I watched the guy make a time-lapse of a canoe.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
And I thought, I could do this. I have one screwdriver in my house, so I can't do this.
So you're saying you're not handy?
I'm saying if I had all those tools and a lathe. Do you have a lathe?
Not sure.
You're not a real man unless you have one. That's what I learned from this. I want to build things. I want to live off the land instead of doing podcasts and radio shows.
Okay. So you're going to build canoes?
Not right now.
With your lathe.
This show, as you said, is the most important thing going. You are awesome. And we're going to do this part. Then I'm getting a lathe.
Yeah, but speaking of canoes, when I was in undergraduate, we built canoes out of concrete every year.
What?
That's still
what kind of law school lets you build canoes?
It was undergraduate. It was a High Northern in engineering. Yeah.
Oh, that's all you had to say.
Bears.
Ohio Northern. Yeah. For all the Bears graduates. What do you call them? The alumni?
That's the word, yes.
Yeah. Well, there's not many of alumni of where I went to college. So they went from a college to university so they could charge you more. But there's a lot of people that almost got through.
Oh, really?
So but they still say they're an alumnus of a place they never graduated.
Well, definitions are made to be expanded.
That is true. Wait a minute. So you go to Ohio Northern for undergrad, and then where did you go for law school?
Capital.
Capital. Okay. Wait, daytime or nighttime? I know a lot of nighttime.
I started at night.
Okay.
And then switched to days after 1 year.
All right. Because if you stay at night, most of those students tend to be the ones that are the bail bondsman type cases.
I don't know. It's really hard. It's a lot of work going at night.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I think most of them did it because they had kids out of wedlock, so they couldn't go during the day. I'm just saying that. I mean, this segment brought to you by Capital University. But I forgot about that because you did. Okay, so you went to Capital. Okay. So I wanted to get into this, though, back to the YouTube thing. I'm watching all these athletes who had to declare bankruptcy.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my favorites of all time, because the quote that goes with this is so cringeworthy. Antoine Walker played for the Boston Celtics, and he signed like a $120 million deal. And the coach at the time, Rick Pitino, said, this is going to set up, this is generational wealth. No one in his family will ever have to worry about money again. Within 5 years, he'd blown it all. But he's not even the worst case. It's just, I saw all these things and they're showing like the real estate that they lost and the cars and all that. And I thought, we all think if we had $1 million, we'd never need another thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking in California, not on YouTube, on mainstream media, and seeing where they're showing cops knocking on doors to evict people for bankruptcies. That's about to be a big deal here in the United States. At the same time, the housing market is going crazy.
It's ridiculous.
What doesn't make sense is you've got people that can't pay for what they have, and then you have people that want to gobble that up at the same time.
Right.
So what is you have dealt with bankruptcies in your practice and I don't want to say how old you are. Let's say you've been practicing for somewhere between 5 and 100 years.
Somewhere between 5.
I don't want to date you on this.
I graduated from law school in 91.
Okay, so that's
and I actually passed the bar the first time in 91.
You weren't like one of the Kennedys?
I wasn't like one of the Kennedys.
They could never pass a bar. You just set me up for that. That's your own fault.
But I'm pumped.
So
Can I have a drum roll?
Can
we edit that out?
Why are you friends with the Kennedys? Listen, the Kennedys are the only people that are being rubbed out by the government. They're not really part of the government, so it doesn't matter.
It's truth.
But so sorry, I was thinking of the Kennedys.
Totally lost
No, but I'm right back. YouTube.
So are you
mainstream.
talking about people, the Kennedys, or are you talking about the band, the Dead Kennedys? I'm lost.
First of all, I think the band. If you looked at the timeline, Dead Kennedys obviously came after the politicians were catching bullets with their head.
Well, it was 1980s.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So of course they didn't come up with. They weren't the dead Nixons. Nobody likes Nixon.
It's truth.
I mean, first of all, my favorite thing in school to learn about presidents is when the TV debates that Nixon, because he was so sweaty on TV, that's why he was losing the debates. Could it have been the fact that his head looked like a melted pumpkin and he's next to John Kennedy, who's like this big sex symbol and he's got this hot wife at home?
So it just tells you how shallow we are as American public.
Yes, that's if you're an American.
I'm not going to vote for the guy with the sweaty lips.
Don't we do that all the time?
We do.
We vote based on our emotions. If I don't like this person,
and yet we elected Trump.
Listen, I don't know if you ever saw The Apprentice, but that guy knows how to run a business on TV.
He does.
And that's all he did with the government.
And he just says you're fired very well.
Well, why did Biden get elected? Because he eats ice cream like a champ.
He does.
Who eats? Have you ever seen it where he doesn't put it like this? It's all at an angle. Yeah. Like he's trying to get into the Death Star at a certain spot. And it's like, just put it up to your mouth, man.
Well, he's got years of experience.
Yeah, he does.
Years of experience.
Listen, nobody likes to segregate buses like Joe Biden. I'll tell you that.
It's truth. He does
Nate, don't edit that. Amplify that. So back to bankruptcies.
Speaking of bankruptcy.
Yeah. So when they show these headlines, they always start in California because I think that is much like Mad Max. They're always out of gas and power and all that. Mm-hmm. And then California is just, we all say, oh, it's just weird out there. It's just different. But I think it's weird when you're looking at the Washington Post or some of these LA papers and they're showing the cops knocking on your door to evict you. And they were evicting people during the pandemic, which was not a natural occurring thing, by the way. We don't have to cover that today. But for 15 months, they told people, don't worry about making your house payment, your student loan payment and all that, as though it was going to go away.
Right.
And now they're saying, listen, if you could just pay 15 months worth of rent in one check.
We'll call it even.
Right. Which is going to be impossible because because 60% of the people, 60% of households in the U.S. can't come up with a $400 payment if they need one. That was a study they did last year. Well, even before that they were trying to determine the average American savings account has $1,000 in it. Okay. That was over 70% of the population has $1,000 in their savings account. Wow. And I was laughing at those people because I had $1,800. So like I'm the king because I have the most money.
You're the one-eyed man.
But when they give you free money, which is tax money, and they say, go spend it, do whatever you want with it. We never say, save this money. So they gave you more than enough to make these house payments when things kicked back off, and nobody did. And I think that's intentional.
It is because they're trying to cook the economy numbers because they're looking at velocity of money. So if they print a whole bunch of money and put it out there and people spend it, then there's a lot of purchasing going on in the economy, which increases the way they calculate the gross national product and makes it look good on paper. Like, oh, look at all this buying that's happening and all this commerce that's happening. We're doing great. And that's the idea. I mean, they're not, it's essentially just cooking the figures so that it looks better on paper.
Right.
That does.
Wasn't it kind of like the story I heard as a kid was, I don't want to call this guy out, but maybe he doesn't have a YouTube account. GD Ritzy's. Do you remember that restaurant?
Yes, I do.
So that guy kept expanding.
I like GD Ritzy's.
First of all,
it's some freaking awesome.
That place was awesome. Yeah, but the guy's business plan was to expand until he was profitable.
Oops.
Okay. So I think when you look at it, I think that's what people are doing now is I want to get in a $300,000 house. I don't know why these numbers seem to matter. It's like there's a threshold to everything. So it's 300, 400, 450, $500,000. Anything under 200, it's like, oh, you're not doing very well. Maybe you're very thrifty and you spend the money, in a very responsible way. But when you've seen bankruptcies, is it because people just don't know what they're doing with money? I think we're the worst educated country with money.
I think it's I think it's a combination of things. First of all, you look at real salaries since the 1970s. Real salaries haven't increased all that much, even though there's been inflation since then. The cost of goods has actually gone down because we buy cheap goods from China and we sell them through places like Walmart, and so
That's the American way.
it is the American way. And so so the salaries just really haven't kept up with, I think, the real rate of inflation. I read an article the other day that said that I think they're saying officially that the rate of inflation right now is about 5%. But if you calculate inflation the way that we did back in 1980, it's actually like 13%. And, at that rate of inflation, nobody, in a couple of years, people are going to be hurting,
Right?
Trying to find some extra money in their wallet. So I think that's part of the problem, and I think that the additional problem is, we sell this idea that the American dream is you go and you buy a house and you get a car and you live on your little quarter-acre lot in the suburbs and have 2.5 kids and life is good, and so people go out and they buy a house and they get a 30-year mortgage, and now you're with your mortgage and your car payment and all this stuff. This article I was reading yesterday, they did a calculation. They're like, you're left with about $400 a month if you're the average person. You're left with about $400 a month for entertainment and anything you want to do besides just paying to live.
Well, I think that the other part is, I think that we are buying the dream, right?
But we're buying it on credit.
Right.
We're not buying it with cash.
Our actual, the actual thing that we're doing is we're going into American debt, not the dream. Right. So you've got to, what's the rock and roll saying? You're selling out to buy the dream, whatever. When you look at it, it's like you're putting yourself in a hole because someone told you that's what you have to have. Right. You don't care about the consequences. And then when the consequences come, like 49% of all marriages ending in divorce, nobody factors that in. The cost of that, to do all that, child support, spousal support, all that, you can get in bankruptcy really quick, even if you're good with your finances.
It's actually cheaper to stay married, by the way.
I know. I thought about this. After being divorced for roughly 12 years, I think if I went back, now she remarried, but if I went back to her, I think I can get some of my money back. It's just going to be super awkward.
I don't think it works that way.
Well, they're going to have to buy like a king size bed because I'm not going to squeeze into a queen with them. But you think about that people don't really know what they're getting into. And I think it's because we don't teach people the value of money.
I agreed, and we don't talk enough about savings. That we have this Social Security that I think the general public thinks that there's going to be Social Security for them when they retire, and that's what they're going to live on. Here's the newsflash: it's not that much money, and even if you get it, it's not that much money. And for people my age, I think it's at least there's at least a percentage, maybe at least a 50% chance that somebody might wake up and say this is silly and stop doing that, which is bad for my generation.
Right.
So there's nobody saving for retirement, but generally when you see bankruptcies happen, what's happened is somebody gets injured and they can't work. And so now you've got hospital bills and you're not making any money. So then you're left with no way out. People will live on credit cards for a little while and stuff like that. But I think I read that the average American right now has about $6,000 in credit card debt.
Yeah.
And the average salary in the United States is somewhere around like $33,000.
That's right.
So if you're thinking, the average person's making $33,000 a year, and you got $6,000 in credit card debt.
But that's per individual.
But but that's not wealth.
Right, but so
that's not even double poverty, really.
But you've got that, and then you get married. Yeah. Your spouse has the same thing.
Right.
So you got $66,000 worth of household income, but $12,000 in debt right there.
Right.
With an interest rate on top of it. Mm-hmm. So you really don't own anything.
No.
So these 30-year mortgages, at some point you think, oh, I don't know who pays those off anymore. I think I read that
mortgages, everybody refinances as soon as they get some equity and to take the money out of the house.
Right.
So everybody just kind of keeps their house completely mortgaged to the hilt. There are a few people like my parents' age. Most of the people that I see that are my parents' age are coming in and their houses are paid off because they paid it off over 30 years, and they've got they've still got some pension or some retirement, and so they're coming in. Most of those people that we see are in pretty good shape. It's folks in my generation and younger living check to check, or they're most of the big secret about the Obama administration. There was a lot of job creation, and the entire economy was actually decent.
Ton of drones,
but the most of the job creation in the Obama administration was in the service industry. And most of them were relatively low-paying jobs, $30,000 a year or less. And that's all great, but when our economy was really booming back in the 50s, we had a lot of manufacturing jobs, which are much more higher-paying jobs, and they don't require skilled labor. So, average Joe was able to go make a substantial amount of money. Working in a factory where, now you go work in a call center, you don't make nearly the same kind of.
And you're waiting on $15 an hour.
Right.
Because the report is that we're recording this in June. I guess for people for the future, 20 years from now, June 2021. Nate, highlight that so people know if they're watching this like in 2041 when we're doing this. They were saying that 4 million people by the end of.
We see the future.
Yeah. Can you imagine if somebody spent their time doing this, watching this? The world is ending and they're watching this. I recommend it. But 4 million people are going to leave the job market.
Things you could be doing.
Yeah, we talked about those earlier.
Yes.
We had a load of those.
Yes, we did.
But pick up that Dead Kennedys album. But when those other 4 million people are leaving the job market, like you said something really poignant a few weeks ago to me. We were done doing the show and I said, I don't know why we can't get people to go. Like I'm looking for people for clients of mine to do HVAC and all that. Can you give the rundown of if you were sitting on unemployment, how much money that equals up to?
Well, yeah, I mean, right now, well, I think part of the federal program is ending, but if you're on unemployment in Ohio, I think you can make up to about $600 a week, which $600 a week is almost $33,000 a year. Then you get another $600 a week from the federal government. So you're now making almost $70,000 a year for literally doing nothing. I mean, just sitting at home. Ohio just reinstated a few weeks ago their requirement that you do a job search. So when all this first rolled out during the virus, folks were losing their jobs. Yeah, I understand, and they wanted to make it easy, but people didn't even have to try to find a job. I mean, you just sit at home and take your money. But if you're making $70,000 a year, not many places. So you think about your average restaurant, you're paying your waitresses or your wait staff, I don't know what, $3-4 an hour plus tips, and you're paying your bussers maybe 8 or 9. I mean, I don't know.
It's got to be at least 8 because I think $7.25, $7.50 is the actual minimum wage
in Ohio, right? Right. So you're paying like $8 or $9 an hour. Well, you can't afford to pay $60,000 a year for somebody to come bust tables. You can't afford that
right.
in a restaurant. I mean, so what's going to happen? I mean, you saw Chipotle the other day. They announced, okay, we're going to pay everybody $15 an hour. Oh, and by the way, we're going to increase prices by 20%. Well, that's
right.
what has to happen.
Right.
You can't just magically say we're going to pay everybody $15 an hour And agricultural workers. I mean, farmers will be suffering from that. I mean, the average itinerant farm guy gets piecework plus housing usually is what they're working for. So if you start saying, well, we got to pay them the equivalent of $15 an hour for working out there, well, that's great. It's good for the worker until food prices are going to go up by 25, 30%.
Right. It always gets passed on somewhere.
Well, I mean, it comes back to the consumer.
Right.
And so the problem is, okay, so say I'm paying now $5 a gallon for gas, and we're paying $10 a pound for any kind of meat, and you're paying $3 a can or $1.50 a can for green beans and stuff like that. Well, all of a sudden that $15 an hour I'm making isn't helping feed me.
Right. But that's why I think it's such a dumb fight to push for that, because it's that yin and yang. If I give, I'm going to take something somewhere else. $15 an hour is not the answer. If gas goes from last summer, I think a high last summer was like $1.87 or something.
Right.
And now it's $3.10, I think, as of this morning.
Right, and it's going to go higher.
Right. It's not going to slow down.
From what I've read, most people are predicting it to be up around $5 an hour, at least in California, by the end of summer. And California is a little bit pricier than we are here.
Right.
So it's still $4 a gallon gas. I mean, that's from last summer doubling the cost of driving anywhere.
Well, the last time we saw gas prices going like this was after 9/11, and then after the housing crisis. The housing crisis, when that...
We were almost this high back in the 70s, in the late 70s under the Carter administration.
Well, I wasn't driving back then.
I wasn't either.
I mean, legally. I was driving, but no one should know that's on my record.
You were like 8.
Yeah. But I was like, cool. Like, I had like a leather jacket and stuff. I was pretty cool back then. I had a Mustang.
What happened?
Started smoking. I took it too far.
Yeah, well, it happens.
But that's why I think that people are waiting it out. Almost like, I'm not going to work until you give me $15 an hour, not realizing what you're doing. Because once it goes to $15 an hour, you're not going to give it back, and the government's not going to change that. So now you're going to be stuck because you're permanently raising prices on everything else.
Right. You see, I guess I think from a global standpoint, the best way to get folks out of poverty is to create more jobs, not to necessarily make the jobs that exist pay more money.
Right.
I mean, the fundamental problem of poverty is you have people who have no job at all. But if we are able to create jobs that are actually substantial paying jobs, so they're non-service industry based jobs, so factory workers, skilled labor, things like that. Well, then you're actually going to start changing people's lives and things like that. Until we are able to create some of that, bring some of that kind of infrastructure back, though, I mean, it's just going to continue the way it's going.
Well, if those jobs hadn't left the country through when NAFTA was pushed through and all that, which is actually a George Bush program that Clinton got pushed through. Those jobs went to Mexico, Canada, overseas. Right. Those were skilled trades. Mm-hmm. So you find yourself, the cost of a car is shooting up like crazy because the microchips aren't made here. Mm-hmm. So if things were shut down in China or Germany or wherever, we can't get the pieces we need to sell the items here. But I think you also, I like what you said about job creation. When you look at a jobs report, it means nothing to me. Because if your job is cutting grass and you don't pay taxes on that, but you started your own business doing that because it's a cash business, that doesn't count. More people working at Walmart does not mean that they don't have careers. And so then I looked a little further into this. The way that China organized their education system is that for, I think it was like a 30-year period, they told everyone you need to go to college. Blue-collar jobs are not worth it. It'll be embarrassing to your family if you get a blue-collar job. Guess who did the same thing at the same time? Us. So we've pushed all these people that are, I'm sure they're great art teachers and all that, but they have no job skill that transfers if you're not going to teach it or you're not going to run a center that you start yourself. That people aren't job creators anymore. They're waiting to get plugged into a machine.
Right. And if you look back through at least the United States history, it's not the big manufacturing companies that we're losing that were the heart and soul of the economy. Really, the heart and soul of the economy has always been small business people. And the way that we have structured now our world, so the way that we tax things and the way that we regulate things, the small businesses are getting squeezed. And the more you squeeze out small businesses, the harder it is to have that job creation, because small businesses are the way that jobs were created on the macro scale for years and years and years. Yeah, there are big companies like Disney employing 50,000 people or something like that, but that's a drop in the bucket, compared to the millions of small businesses that are employing 3, 4, 5 people each. And those small businesses are also where you're going to end up getting the potential for higher wages, the ones that aren't service-based.
And the potential for people becoming entrepreneurs based on what they learned there, taking that applied trade and doing it for themselves.
Right. So, that's where I think that the big miss is in our economy right now is everything we're doing is just killing small businesses. I mean, the tax programs are they're set in such a way that Warren Buffett hardly pays any taxes at all. These guys are making money basically on capital gains and losses in there. And
but he thinks you should pay more taxes.
But, well, I don't think Warren does, but Mark Zuckerberg does.
Well, as I said, anything on social media, I believe, and if Zuck tells me so, I'm paying more. And this is what I want to say, since we have to sum up the end of this show. What did we solve today? Bankruptcy is bad. It's cheaper to keep her. And don't go to college, kids. That's going to be it for Objections. We'll see you next week.